is Aisyah. Hi. My name is SYAFIQAH.
Hi, my name is HAIDA HUMAIRA.
Hi. My name is NAFHAH. Today we will present Chapter 4 under subject International Economy or ECO561. We will present factor intensity, factor abundance and the HO theorem in this presentation.
Now, before we go further to Heckscher-Ohlin theory, let me introduce you to factor intensity. The factor intensity is the fundamental concept in HO theory, where the concept is that we assume there exists two commodity X and Y in a country, and we assume that there's only two factors for the production, which are capital and also labor. Two components under factor intensity, which are capital intensive and also labor intensive. So basically, in a country, there exists two commodity X and Y, and we want to determine either the commodity X and Y is capital intensive or labor intensive. A commodity is said to be capital intensive if the capital labor ratio, which is K/L, is greater than the other commodity. For example, if you can see from this graph for nation 1, the x-axis is the units of labor used to produce commodity X and Y, and the y-axis is for the capital used to produce commodity X and Y. These two slopes here represent the capital labor ratio for commodity Y and also commodity X. As we can see here, to produce 1 unit of commodity Y, we're gonna need 2 units of capital and also 2 units of labor, which makes the capital labor ratio is equals to 1. On the other hand, we can see that to produce 1 unit of commodity X, we're gonna need 1 unit of capital and also 4 units of labor, which makes the ratio is equals to 1/4. Hence, we can say that commodity Y is capital intensive and commodity X is labor intensive. We need to take note that the absolute amount of capital and labor in production of commodity X and Y does not important to determine the capital or labor intensive. The only important thing to determine either the commodity is capital or labor intensive is that to calculate the ratio. Lastly, if you can see the graph for nation 2, we can see that to produce 1 unit of commodity Y, we're gonna need 4 units of capital and also 1 unit of labor, which makes the capital labor ratio is equals to 4. On the other hand, for commodity X, we're gonna need 2 units of capital and also 2 units of labor to produce 1 unit of commodity X. Hence, we can say that Y is still the capital intensive and also X is the labor intensive. Although both nations has the same type of factor intensity for both commodity X and Y, compared for both nation 1 and 2, we can see that the ratio for commodity Y in nation 2 is greater than the ratio for commodity Y in nation 1. This is because we can say that the capital relatively cheaper in nation 2 compared to nation 1. And because of the capital is relatively cheaper in nation 2, the producer in nation 2 tend to use more capital than the labor, which then will make the commodity Y in nation 2 as the capital intensive rather than the labor intensive. But the question now is, why is it the capital is cheaper in nation 2 rather than nation 1? We will answer your question in the next section, which is factor abundance.
Alright, now I will explain the factor abundance. So, there are two common ways to define factor abundance, which are physical units and also factor price. Okay, first, physical units is a quantity-based definition. So, a country is considered K abundant if the ratio of total capital to total labor, which is TK/TL, is higher than in another ratio. So, even if it has less total capital, it can still be considered capital abundant if it has much fewer workers. And this definition consider only the supply of resources. Okay, next is factor price, which is price-based definition. Okay, a nation is K abundant if the price of capital relative to labor, R/W, is lower than in another nation. R is interest rate of capital and W is the wage cost. And okay, this means that capital is relatively more cheaper than in that nation. Okay, unlike the quantity approach, This factor price consider both supply and demand because prices are affected by the market force. Next is the factor abundance and the shape of production frontier. Based on this graph, we can see that the production frontier of nation 1 is wider and flatter than the production of nation 2. Why this happen? Because since nation 2 is K abundant and Y is K intensive, nation 2 can produce relatively more of Y than nation 1. Another one is since nation 1 is L abundant and commodity X is L intensive, nation 1 can produce more of commodity X. So that's all from me.
Next, I will explain the Heckscher-Ohlin theorem. This is general equilibrium framework for HO theory. So this model assumes that both nations utilize the same technology and have identical preferences. Therefore, the only variation is in their factor endowment. So first, taste and distribution of ownership of factors of production will drive to demand for final commodities. Demand will generate demand for factors to manufacture them. So, factor demand and supply of factors will affect factor prices. Factor prices and technology will affect commodity prices. The differences in commodity prices between nations encourage trade. This model illustrates production possibility frontier (PPF). Before trade, nation 1 is labor abundant. PPF bias to good X, while nation 2 is capital abundant, so PPF bias to good Y. With trade, nation 1 will specialize good X and export it, and nation 2 will specialize good Y and export it. Both will import what they don't produce. What both nations will gain after trade? Both countries move to the higher different curve. Next, trade triangle in the diagram shows the quantity that exported and imported. So overall, comparative advantages drive specialization and mutual benefits from trade.
Now, I will explain about the factor price equalization theorem. It is also called as the Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, who was developed by Paul Samuelson based on the HO trade theories. So international trade will bring about equalization in the relative and absolute returns to homogeneous factors across nations. In short, wages and other factor returns will be the same after specialization and trade occur. So this is the figure for changes in relative prices and factor returns due to trade, and for keywords, horizontal axis measure for wage rate and return to capital. Meanwhile, for vertical axis, we measure price of good X and Y. So nation 1 is at point A and nation 2 at point A prime. So before trade, as we can see, W per R in nation 1 is lower than nation 2, and PA also is lower than PA prime. Therefore, nation 1 has a comparative advantage in commodity X. So after trade, nation 1 specializes in the production of commodity X and increases the demand of labor relative to capital. Next, nation 2 specializes in the production of commodity Y and decreases the W per R. This will continue until point B will equal to B prime. As a result of trade, PS per PY will become equal, and this will only occur when W per R has also become equal in the two nations, as long as both nations continue to produce both commodities X and Y.
To conclude, the Heckscher-Ohlin theory explains why countries trade based on their abundant resources such as labor and capital. Overall, we can see that the theory helps us understand how resources, trade and incomes are connected between countries.